OCO, everyone. OCO. It's been a while, everyone. It's been a while. So, this episode I'm doing today is actually a redo that was not released to the public. And it's on spirituality. Specifically, evolving from spirituality. So, here's all or nothing. I actually took some notes down because the reason why I have to redo the audio is because the first one was a hot mess. So I put it in the archives. And I might not never release it because it was messed up. And plus I'm more informed now. So y'all gonna be in for some great high vibrational information today. And before I start during my discussion, or probably near the end, I will talk about the next episode I will discuss, if it comes to mind. Right now, it's blank. I do have things in mind, though, to talk about in the next episodes. So I still have, as long as I have my brain, I have content forever. So as long as I'm living, y'all willing. So, the last episode that I did on spirituality was like in March, if I'm not mistaken. And to be honest, I was quite, how can I put this? I was imbalanced in a way. I was like in a tug of war with my physical and spirituality. And a lot of things I mistaken as spiritual was actually physical matters, but at the same time, when one was triggered, the other one was eventually triggered, if that makes any sense. So obviously I got to the bottom of it, and I made a vow that if I have some form of clarity on spirituality, I will make a part 2. So this is basically my part 2 because I did a few months later, as of now, receive clarity on spirituality. So I'm entitling this episode Evolving from Spirituality because there's something way greater and more powerful than spirituality. So that is what I'm going to address today. So if you hear some paper rattling, it's because I took notes. Now, sometimes I'm not going to take notes. Sometimes I have to because it's important information I don't want to leave out. And I wouldn't want left out if I was to hear someone else's point of view. So, once again, here I go. So, I'm going to start off what I wrote. So, I had wrote a few things on Twitter. A few tweets. The first one I'm going to start with, let me see, because all this is interesting. So I'm going to start with my definition, my connotation of spirituality. Spirituality is the mentality. You have to surpass spirituality once you become aware of its creation. So, once I became aware of spirituality creation, which is the I'm Light presence of Aliyah, I realized that if it wasn't for the ability, there would be no motion within spirituality itself. So, I was close to calling myself enlightened. But then I came across Kaddish, which I'm still going to make an episode on because I always talk about being Kaddish. But I basically wrote that tweet to signify the fact that you know when you evolve from spirituality, when you become aware of the creation. The creator rather than the creation. Because the creation is just the aftermath, the end result, or the result. So I wanted to make that clear, that when you evolve from spirituality, you will know because you will ask yourself, is there more than spirituality? And before I forget, someone had made a post. I don't know if it was from Instagram or Facebook, but they said that if it was from Instagram, something that Jada Pinkett shared. And in that statement, it said, if you knew God, you wouldn't call yourself God. That was deep. Now, for those who haven't watched my religion episodes, because if I'm not mistaken, I did a part 2. It's been so long since I've been on here. I mentioned that I glorify Aliyah. And I didn't go into full details as I can go into, which I will eventually go into, about the difference between Aliyah and God. I did make it known that there's a big difference. And I started off worshiping God, and how there's a difference, a thin line between worshiping and glorifying. So y'all can go back and look at those episodes if y'all would like, or just continue to ride the episodes out that comes after this one. So I agree with that post, that Jada Pinkett post, because it's within the same lens as how I view Aliyah. To know Aliyah is not to claim that you're Aliyah. So to intertwine this with spirituality, once you learn what spirituality is, which is just the mentality, you wouldn't claim to be a mentality or a spirit, because you will realize that it's just a tool for you to navigate through this life that we live in, aka this system, because this life that we are in is built off a system. To be very frank with you all. So let me read that again. Spirituality is the mentality, nothing less, nothing more. You have surpassed spirituality once you become aware of its creation. Now I said creation, but I'm going to correct that and say creator. Everything was created from the common denominator, and it's the omnipresent one. To reach their own, of which you may prefer to call the omnipresent one. So, another tweet that I want to highlight and these tweets are a few months back. These are not recent tweets. So if you used to go on my Twitter, you won't, them not going to be the first tweet you see. So another one that I wrote is that there is not three, have to correct myself once again. And there's nothing wrong with corrections, especially if it's self-correction. Because you know how you want to talk to yourself. You know how you want a message to be delivered compared to someone else correcting you, and they no telling how they're going to conduct themselves or deliver a message to you. It may be in a kind way, it may be in an arrogant way. You never know someone else's delivery until it's delivered. But back to my statement. So, I wrote on Twitter a few months back that there's two mindsets. And this probably was like a month ago, probably not even more than that. So, I stated that you are either the one that's learning curriculum or you the curriculum thyself. And I want to elaborate on that because I didn't do that on social media. That's why it's great to tap into my podcast, because I elaborate more. So, I actually came up with that concept while I was in college. Actually, before I separated myself, which I'm going to talk about in a whole nother episode of why I left college. So, I came up with this concept while I was in college, and I realized that you either going to be the curriculum that people learn about, or you going to be the one that's learning about someone else's curriculum. Curriculum is information. Equivalence. So you either going to learn someone else's, you either going to learn to build someone, you either going to learn to build someone up, or you're going to learn to build yourself up. The only in between is the decision you make. So once I realized that, I was like, wow. I started to feel like, okay, I'm wasting time. What can I do to gain my time back? And I decided to be the curriculum that people learn about. So there's two different mindsets. And I'm not saying one is greater than the other, because there comes a time where you're going to need both. Duality. So the third tweet, which is actually the first, this one came before the first two. This is my favorite tweet one of my favorite tweets that I ever tweeted. And I actually posted this on Instagram before Twitter. So I said there are 3 types of people. You have those who adjust to the system of the world. You have people who impress their way through the world. And then you have those who exhale from the world system. So I'm going to talk about the adjust ones. So the adjust type of people, and this all ties into spirituality, because this all have an effect on the mind. Just in case anyone like, is she throwing herself off? Like I'm not. This ties right into spirituality. I started off, first of all, I've activated all 3. The one that I am currently in and hoping to maintain is to exhale. But let me slow my pace and go back to adjust. So I started off as the one to adjust. And had a hard time doing that. I actually never adjust. Let me take that back. I did. And I found myself going crazy when I adjust. So the adjust ones of the world are those who find it hard to navigate through this world, so they try to adjust to it by following the instructions that are given. Whether you started off as religious, atheists, usually we all come in this world and adjust to what's already accustomed around us. And that was me. I had a hard time of maintaining that adjustment because I felt like the odd one out. I felt like something wasn't right and I couldn't identify it. Just had a very, very hard time adjusting to this world system. Coming to find out it wasn't meant for me to adjust. So I moved on. Now, impress. That I really have to take some time to really dig deep in that, because I wasn't the type to impress people. As far as I went with impressing is making a point. I felt I always needed to make a point. I felt like I always needed to convince people that what I knew at the time was right, which it wasn't, coming to find out later on in my life. So that was my way of impressing, not only myself, but trying to impress others. Like, I know something, I'm worth listening to. So, and we all, whether we want to admit it or not, find ourselves trying to impress, whether it's impressing ourselves or impressing others. And we do that in the likeness of our way of expressing what is in the makings of us, which draws from our experience and our encounters in life. So that was my way of impressing, not only trying to impress myself, but impress others with the knowledge I felt was right at the time. And I came to the conclusion and the realization that if you have to convince someone that something is right or wrong, you the problem that needs to be solved. And trust me, I found out I was the problem that needed to be solved and made the conscious decision to solve that problem and not dwell within that problem and make the problem worse than what it already was. So that's how I got out of impressing. Once I realized that impressing was causing a depression, I had to step back and say, okay, Cree, analyze this thing. How are we going to navigate through this? Because staying stagnant is not going to do nothing but damage me. And of course, I did not choose to be damaged. I chose to heal. Healing is a long process. There's no measurement to healing. You will always find yourself trying to heal from something. Well, at least I do. Let me not say you, because I don't know you personally. I can only reflect on me. I had to make that conscious decision to heal myself from that and to reach his own, because some people stay stuck in adjusting to the world system. Some people stay stuck in impressing. A lot of people actually. But to each his own, whatever works for you as an individual. It didn't work for me. So the third one, to exhale from the world system. That works well for me. Now, I'm still learning myself as I go. 25 years of living, I'm quite sure there's a lot to learn. More to learn. I came to the point that to know everything is to know nothing. And what I'm implying by that is there's no measurement to knowledge. So when I say to know all things is to know nothing, I'm referring to the fact that knowledge cannot be measured. And it takes curiosity for that to be a proven factor. So I just want to give y'all my meaning, because a lot of people say to know it all is to know nothing, but they don't have anything to follow up with that. They don't have a backbone to that statement. They don't have no reasoning, rather, behind that statement. So I just wanted to give y'all my reasoning. To know it all is to know nothing. There's no measurement to knowledge. Curiosity have taken me places that knowledge never will. That's because there's no limit to knowledge through curiosity. Message. So, I say that to say this. Curiosity expand my knowledge. And because of curiosity, I can honestly say that I'm exhaling. And my purpose even changed. My purpose is to evolve. And notice I said my purpose. That's an internal purpose of mine. Now, for the Almighty, maybe it's the same. Maybe I would be corrected. But as of what I'm experiencing and what I comprehend from my experience, as I examine and look at my common denomination in life, everything that I went through and every tool that I've used, I always bounce back and recenter myself to evolving from something in some fashionable way, shape, or form. So that's why I decided to stay in that third category, and that's to exhale. Let go, relinquish. Just to evolve and bring everything into a collective and make everything in my grasp make sense. And it's a lot. It takes a lot because I've learned a lot. The more you learn, the more you have to... The more you learn, the more you have to embrace yourself, because it's a lot. It can take a toll on you. On me. Let me not say you. It'll take a toll on me to not embrace it and exhale. And I exhale. I let go to evolve. I can't hold on to something and let it all build up to the point that it weighs more than my physical standpoint or my mental standpoint. So exhaling, it's challenging, but it's worth the challenge to exhale from this world system, because the system was not built. It was never built by the people for the people. And that's what I came to realization of. Now moving on from this statement, because there's so much I want to talk about and I don't want to leave nothing out. And I don't want to make this longer than it have to be made, extended. So, once I realized that there are three phases, three types of people in this world system that we live in, I later on went to find out about so many other things like astrology, chakras, stuff like that, which I'm still going to talk about. I did not forget. But also recently, like a month ago, likely, or a month before that, I found out about dimensions. I only thought that there was 5 dimensions because a lot of people actually, especially spiritual people, been talking about, oh, a lot of y'all in 3D, y'all ain't in 5D. I'm like, what is this stuff? What are they talking about? So I became curious. Keyword, curious. Being that the curious person I am, I did some investigation and coming to find out there's 12 dimensions. People talk about 5 so much that you will assume, well, I assumed rather, that it was 5 dimensions only. No, it's 12. And some people say, especially on the internet, this is why I do not guide. Internet is not the guard of information for me. Okay, the internet is, I know certain things that the internet don't know about. And I'm well aware of how the internet is ran. It's definitely ran by people. A certain selective of people. People can, the masses can say, oh, it's the computer itself. No, it takes a mastermind to run the computer, okay? That you know, there's some separation within that. But let's be clear, the masterpiece is a selective group of individuals. Okay, so I stopped talking because my phone, some notifications got through and I forgot to put my phone on Do Not Disturb. And I didn't want to sound like a robot to you all. So I had to pause. But like I was saying, there are 12 dimensions. And I refuse to let the internet be the gatekeeper of information for me. The gatekeeper of information is what the Almighty allowed me to experience. That is my gatekeeper of information, which is the omnipresent one, not the internet. And finding out the 12 dimensions is a great reason why I will never let the internet be my guardian of information. Because someone stated on the internet, just from searching on a search engine, that it's impossible to reach the 12th dimension. And that is total false. That is false. You can reach it. Now, the 12 dimensions, I'm going to start with the first and go down to the 12th. So that's how I'm going to do it. That's the order. And this all ties into spirituality, and this will help me to evolve from spirituality. So I'm giving the 12 dimensions because this is my remedy of how I evolved from spirituality. Nothing less, nothing more. There probably is something more though. Stay tuned. It's a collective of things. This is the big piece. So, The first dimension is dealing with stuff and matter blocks of life. This is the physical realm. Now there's 3 types of realms in dimension. And that's physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. I said 3, that's 4. I want to make sure. Let me double check. So yes, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. Now mental and spiritual, that's the same thing. So I'm glad I did say 3. A lot of people don't know that, but your mentality is the exact same thing as your spirituality. The only difference is confusion comes in and mistake the mentality for a physical aspect of things, and that's not the case. You don't mix internal with external things. Yes, it could be a cause and effect, which there is, but there's also a separation that needs to be comprehended as well. So the first dimension, like I said once again, it's in the realm of physical, and it's the staff and matter of blocks of life. So the first dimension is the stage of producing, building up something. You build off of what you experience in life, or you consume rather. That's the lowest stage of a dimension. That's the lowest stage that your mentality can be in as well. So just like, for example, look at the 12 dimensions as a metamorphosis. So it's like me, when I was born knowing nothing. Growing up, I only knew what I was exposed to. Just like everybody else, no one's exempt. It's like doing an experiment in a way. Giving birth to a child, having that child locked in a cage. You're not present with them. You just lock them in a cage by themselves. Eventually, they're going to die because they've not been fed. They've not been healed. Because touch can have an effect on that child. There's some deep stuff involved in that. I'm going to talk about that when I talk about biology and stuff in a whole different episode. That is deep, and that's going to take more information for me to dig from to talk about that, but physical touch is important. Holding a child, an infant, a baby, and just giving birth and just leaving that child in the wilderness, eventually they're going to die because they have nothing nurturing them, nothing. So we all need to be nurtured in some fashionable way, shape, or form. And whether we were nurtured from pollution or not, the only way to survive is to be nurtured. So that's the first dimension, is being nurtured. Everything you know is coming from what you consumed. You know how to talk English. You know how to speak in English, rather, because your family speaks English. If your family spoke another language, then you would speak that language. A lot of people are only Christians because they was born into Christianity. So some people, a lot of us, well, I'm not going to say us anymore because I'm learning to separate myself from what I was birthed with. But that's another story. Once again, knowing comes from what we consume, what we was born with. That's why it's important for me to relinquish. Now, going into the second dimension. The second dimension, an example that was given is like prior to Jesus Christ, and that is dealing with the emotional realm. That's dealing with attachment. What are you attached to in the second dimension? A lot of us are moved by emotions and moved by what we are attached to. And that's why Christianity, Jesus Christ, was used as an example. Because a lot of people operate their emotions off a biblical standard. And an example of that will be, since I gave an example for the first dimension, which was a baby being nurtured. An example for the second dimension will be let me make sure that this is a great example first before I give it. Okay. I made a lot of decisions based off my emotions. My, at the time, religious emotions. Like, there were certain things I didn't wear because if I wear it, I felt like I would be condemned and go to hell because I read certain things. So that's an emotional attachment to something. That's the second dimension, is when you emotionally attach to something. What are you emotionally attached to? When that attachment is touched, you are touched by it. That's like watching a movie and you watching somebody cry, you really feel the emotions, and now you starting to cry. That's an emotional attachment. That's the second dimension. So I gave you 2 examples. The third dimension, the popular one that a lot of people talk about, besides the 5th. People talk about the 3rd and the 5th dimension as if those are the only 2 dimensions that exist. And if y'all just peeped and realized, you would realize that a lot of people live in the 1st and 2nd and haven't even made it to the 3rd dimension yet. Mentally, spiritually, it's equivalent. So, the 3rd dimension, aka one of the most popular dimensions, is the information and technology age. And that's dealing with the mentality. Now, once again, it's the same thing with spiritual, but I guess whoever wrote this, because I only wrote down the title. But for the examples, this is coming from me and my experience, not the person that wrote down the 12 dimensions. So, and it's important to, how can I put this? If you don't know how to interpret things, this is going to leave you very vulnerable. It's going to you are very vulnerable and gullible to be controlled when you don't know how to interpret things and put words in your own words, through your own lens, through your own experience. That's very important. That's why I don't listen to people who regurgitate. I hear that all the time. Like, people say, what is something that people regurgitate all the time? A lot of people say, God is good. But don't even know the meaning of the words that they speak. And that's not everyone, but for some, that's the case. So it's just a matter of knowing what you speak of, rather than just regurgitating, because you heard it so much to the point that you adapt to it. Now you're a mockingbird. So back to the 3rd dimension, because this is dealing with information in the technology age. You have to evolve from that. So the 3rd dimension is dealing with awareness. What are you aware of? And it's very similar to the 1st dimension. The only difference is the 1st dimension is just consuming everything. You a sponge in the 1st dimension. You basically a sponge. The 2nd dimension, you basically emotionally attached to what you know, to everything that is soaked within that sponge. The 3rd dimension, now the sponge has been squeezed. Now information is coming out. What was installed in you is now being released to the public. Now it's being released. What you have been taught growing up is now showcasing through your communication in this 3rd dimension. What you are aware of is only what you experienced. You can only speak on what you know. That's the 3rd dimension. You're speaking on what you know. You're speaking on what you're aware of. Now the 4th dimension this is where it gets more challenging. The higher of a dimension you go, the challenge increase. So a lot of people don't make it past the fourth dimension because they stuck on only what they know, only what they're aware of. Have you ever came across someone who says, that argues all the time and say, what I know is true, what you know is false. That's because you only know from your point of view. You can only argue for what you know about. You can't stand up for something you don't know nothing about much or at all. So, and it amazes me when people say, you false, you this wrong. And they never experienced it. It's like saying pizza nasty and you never had pizza a day in your life. How can you say pizza is nasty and salad is all you ate your whole life? Now you see something different, you want to go against it. Oh, no, that ain't right. This right. Because this is all I know. This is what all provided to me. And the fact that you have something different, something must be wrong with you. And it's like, what? So this is why a lot of people do not make it past the third dimension, because they are stagnant and stuck only on what they know. And they are not open to learn new things, which is the fourth dimension. The fourth dimension is dealing with the Masonic and is dealing with the Ascension, which is, this is the spiritual realm, which is the key word of the fourth dimension is duality. And with the duality, you are being open to know the known and the unknown in the fourth dimension. A lot of people skip the fourth dimension because they don't want to accept all possibilities. And they go straight into the fifth dimension, delusionally. And the reason why I say delusionally, because if you can't make it past the fourth dimension, how are you in the fifth? So when you hear somebody say, oh, you still stuck in the third dimension, I'm in the fifth, bring up the fourth dimension to them. Tell them, well, have you made it past the fourth? Because you didn't mention that. You mentioned the third dimension, but you didn't tell me nothing about the fourth. Did you make it past the fourth? Because if they didn't, then they are delusionally lying to you, whether it's knowingly or unknowingly, saying they in the fifth dimension. And it's very much impossible to be in the fifth dimension mentally when you didn't even make it past the fourth through your unacceptance. So that's a mouthful, but hey, it's a fighting tool to use when somebody want to try to make a fool out of you, when they the ones that haven't been schooled on much. And it's mainly by choice. Moving on. To the fifth dimension. The fifth dimension is dealing with interdependent relationships. This is the physical realm. The key word for the fifth dimension is a common denomination. Now, just in case I didn't make the fourth dimension clear, because I give examples, the example of the fourth dimension is just being aware of all things that's in the midst of your grasp, and not only in the midst of your grasp, but in the midst of what something is being presented. Being open to learn. That is my example for the fourth. Now, my example for the fifth dimension, which is the common denomination, is look at the fifth dimension as how can I just tracing things back to where it come from, questioning everything, basically. Not only questioning everything, but actually looking for the answers. Because some people don't go past questioning. They just question something and they ask the question, but no answer has been presented because they look, okay, how can I explain this without stuttering so much? They didn't look past the question. Once you ask the question, it's your duty to actively search for what you are questioning. Whether someone's going to give it to you or you have to seek for it yourself. So the fifth dimension is just dealing with how are we all connected? What can heal us? That's just basically connecting the dots with the fifth dimension. Make it all make sense. So that's what the fifth dimension is all about. It's just connecting, finding out how we all connected, rather. So the sixth dimension is symbolic relationships. This is dealing with the emotional realm. And my example for this would be Agent Smith from The Matrix, the movie, The Matrix. And if one is sick, all is sick. This is dealing with regurgitators, people who repeat the same thing over and over. You could see it from a religious standpoint and a spiritual standpoint. How they all say the same thing, or news anchors. They all say the same thing no matter what state they in. Just regurgitating. And it's symbolic. You can see the actions. Body movements the same. Gestures the same. Hairstyles may be the same or influenced. The sixth dimension is very powerful, especially in the industry. How you see a lot of people put one hand covering the eye. And it's commonly the right eye that they're covering up and exposing just the left eye and the left eye only. And for a lot of people to say the Illuminati is not real, why do we have all these symbols and all these people doing the exact same thing? Something got to give confirmation. Something has to give clarity. Like, come on now. So the sixth dimension is very deep, very important. I see that play out. And none of these dimensions are good or bad. Matter of fact, they are both. They both good and bad. In the hands that are dealt, you will see one play out more than the other in the hands that are dealt. So a lot of people misabuse these 12 dimensions. Some don't abuse these 12 dimensions. But in this case, a lot of people misuse rather than misabuse. Misuse the sixth dimension. So symbols is a way of communication. It's a language. Very deep. A lot of people do not get symbols. That's why a lot of people get manipulated and deceived. Which is a whole different story. Going into the seventh dimension. Now, the seventh dimension is dealing with the complete hive mind communities. This is the mental. This is the seed mindset. A lot of people say, when it comes to the seventh dimension, a lot of people say, get to the root of a problem. What good is it to get to the root of a problem when you didn't even dig up the seed? The seed is where all problems or all solutions reside, depending on the scenario. The seed is where all problems or solutions reside. If you're not willing to dig up the seed, the root means nothing. The root is just it's just the breed that came from the seed. That's what breeded from the seed. So you have to have a seed mindset and be willing to dig deeper than what's been perceived to you. That's the seventh dimension. And like I said, the seed is the example. The eighth dimension is dealing with rebirth. That is the symbol of the eighth dimension. This dimension is dealing with plants, galaxies, universes. And this is the spiritual realm. Now, in order for something to be created, it must be birth from something. So, everything happened for a reason. The universe did not create itself. The universe had to be created from something that's more powerful than it. It blows my mind when people say, the universe talking to me. All praise to the universe. But those are people who haven't really dig deep into the knowings of the unknowings. But yeah, everything is birth from the birther. itself, which is the omnipresent one. So, and this is, like I said, this is from the spiritual standpoint. So this is dealing with the mentality of things. This is not dealing with the reasoning behind the spirituality, which is a whole different story, a whole different topic, a whole different episode, really. So I'm just going to focus on the spiritual side of the 8th dimension, as well as the other ones, because this is the only side that I'm touching on right now in this episode. So let's go back and not get off track here. Well, as for me, not to get off track. So the 8th dimension is dealing with rebirth. Very similar to Scorpio energy, transformation, evolving. In order for something to live, something must die. A lot of people look at that as a sacrifice, depending on what analogy you view it from. Or are you talking about human sacrifice, or are you talking about a metaphoric sacrifice, or whatever, literal or through a parable? Basically, is what I'm saying. So obviously, I wouldn't dare throw this topic off by talking about something that can actually throw it off, this particular topic off. So I'm going to stay on track. I have to remind myself, because I want to talk about so many other things right now that ties in with the 8th dimension. But just know that it's deep and it's worth talking about, which I will talk about it from other standpoints. But right now, spiritual, Chris. Stick on the spirituality side of things. Whew. So yes, 8th, dealing with rebirth. What are you rebirthing? Just because what we learned as children, just go back to the first dimension. What we learned as infants may not be correct. There must be correction along the way. And the 8th dimension is going to reassure you of that. So, just in case y'all didn't get it, you get it now. The 9th dimension, which is one of my favorite dimensions, is the soul of a planet, galaxy, yeah. So this is the physical realm, and a key word that I would use for this 9th dimension is comparing. Have you ever heard of the 2 words comparing, contrast? Yes, that is very much needed in the 9th dimension. The 9th vibration, the vibration of the number 9 is dealing with salvation, deliverance. What are you being delivered from? In order to be delivered from something, you must compare it to what is being held against your will and held for your will. Compare and contrast, basically. So this 9th dimension is dealing with balance with the 3 different layers of a dimension, which is union, unification, and unity. I'm going to go more into that in another episode, because I don't want to overlap the different topics or whatever. I don't want to create a whole different lane within one topic. So, the 9th, if you didn't get nothing else from the 9th dimension, just know to be balanced in your knowing, compare and contrast. That way, that can help you grow. Now, for us, the 10th dimension, that's dealing with the deities, devas, and the angels. And I might not be pronouncing the devas part right. That word, I'm probably pronouncing all types of wrong. So I'm going to spell it out just in case I am. D-E-V-A-S. D-E-V-A-S. That is the spelling of the word I tried to pronounce. Devas. So this is like the emotional realm. And this is dealing with order. But this is like all these dimensions are powerful. But the closer it gets to 12, whoo, child. So this 10th dimension is dealing with the dominant. I want to make sure. Priogram. And this is dealing with like so dealing with this dominant piogram, would it be the order that you were born into or the order you created yourself? That's very important. That's very deep. And I'm going to say that again. Would this dominant piogram be of an order that you were born into or an order you created by separating from the order that you were born into? Very, very deep. Order is very important. Order equals control, whether it's of yourself or of others, or you the one that's actually being controlled from others. So very deep, very questionable to the likings of the mind, aka the spirit. And that's not something people should overlook. The 10th dimension, none of these dimensions should be overlooked, especially not 10. The 11th, and this is close, we almost done with the dimensions. The 11th dimension is yin yang, eros, and etorica. Erotorica. I probably pronounced that all types of wrong too. Erotica. Once again, Erotica. This most likely etorica. Now this is dealing with the mentality, the mental realm. This is mixture. I will refer the 11th dimension as like a stirring pot of gumbo. That's how I will compare the 11th dimension. That is my example for the 11th dimension. Now, going back to the 10th right quick, my example for the 10th dimension is order, just in case y'all didn't get that. But yeah, so the 11th dimension, that's dealing with like the stirring pot of gumbo. It's like taking any and everything that you've learned that's in the midst of your grasp and placing it in the order that it needs to be placed. Know when to exercise your freedom and know when to protect your freedom. Know when to exercise your free will. Know when to protect it, which is the exact same thing I said, just in different words. That's very important in regards of the 11th dimension, because there's a time and a place for everything. There's a time to be angry. There's a time to be sad. There's a time to be happy. There's a time to be emotionless. Like some situations doesn't require for you to be led by your emotions. Some situations require for you to be led by your spirituality, aka your mentality. So it's all about not only the balance, but the discernment. The 11th dimension is all about discernment, knowing when, knowing what, knowing how. And discernment is not knowing the difference between what is right and what is wrong, but what is almost right and what is actually right. But it's deeper than that, because in order to know if something right or not, you must know what's wrong about it first. So, duality is a must with the mixture, but the biggest difference between duality was mentioned in the 4th dimension. So let me compare the two, which I'm using the 9th energy to do so. The difference between the 4th dimension and the 11th dimension is the 4th dimension causes you to be aware of what is good and what is bad. The 11th dimension is causing you to use those two in its proper manners. So the 11th dimension is very powerful. Very, very powerful. Now, here's the final and most important dimension of all dimensions. All of them important. But without this one, you failed somewhere you failed somewhere in between 1 and 12 if you don't get 12. So the 12th dimension is I am and I am that I am. All that is. Oh, y'all see how I flowed right there? Let me see that again. Gotta snap. I am and I am that I am. All that is. See, that was clever right there. That's dealing with the spiritual realm. And my example of that is the omnipresent one. The omnipresent one. And So the 12th dimension is dealing with no attachment plus attachment equals no attachment. It all circles back to where everything started. Our mind must be like the presence of the Almighty, omnipresent. So I say that to say this. Accept everything for what it is. In order to do that, you must not accept. Yeah, that's deep. That is deep. That is actually the hardest dimension to conquer. Because we were born attached to so many things. Just to grow up to be unattached from it, it can be difficult in most cases. A lot of us don't want to be detached from certain things that are part of the second dimension, which causes emotional attachment. So the 12th dimension is very, very challenging for a lot of people. And the person that said something on the internet, they said the 12th dimension is impossible. I can see why they said it, but that doesn't mean I agree. Someone have to be brave enough to say, look, in order for me to be attached, I must be unattached. Then I will be unattached. And a lot of people, they're not going to realize that. They're like, that don't make sense. It's not meant to make sense through the ears. It's only meant to make sense through the eyes of one's experience. So only the experience will get that. And I'm going to leave it on that note. This is how I evolved from spirituality. That 12th dimension is what helped me evolve from spirituality. Now, I usually enclose or conclude rather by saying love, peace, Kaddish. I'm learning Cherokee bit by bit, so I want to say love and peace in Cherokee, and I'm going to still say Kaddish, which is in Aramaic. They family to one another, by the way. Cherokee and Aramaeans. The only way to prove that is to trace information back to where it came from. But moving on. So, bear with me because this is my first time doing it, and I'm not going to say these words right, but I guarantee you, the longer I keep saying it, I'm going to get it right. And I'm going to conclude every episode from now on with 3 terminologies that help me stay sane with my spirituality as a tool and not a navigator. Know where to place things. Some things is just meant to be a testimony. Some things are meant to just be a tool. And some things is just what you need to get by in this life. It just so happened I outgrow spirituality. But moving on to my conclusion. Love is Adegayudi. Peace is Inwadahedi. Now, I know I probably pronounced that wrong. Inwadahedi. There you go, Kriya. Okay. So, let me enclose. Adegayudi. Inwadahedi. Kaddish. Yes, I said it right, y'all. Kaddish.